What happened to the prophet's daughter will break your heart. There are children who are born into light, and there are children who are born into the darkness of prejudice, where their very first breath has to push back against an entire world. 14 centuries ago, in the sun-drenched city of Mecca, where people might rejoice at the birth of a son but quietly bury a baby girl alive simply because she was a girl, a cry rose up that tore through that shroud of darkness. It was the night Zaynab, the firstborn daughter of Muhammad ibn Abdullah, came into the world. It seemed like an ordinary night in the modest home of Khadijah bint Khuwaylid, yet no one knew that that moment would become the beginning of a spiritual revolution, a door opening for humanity to see the true dignity of women. When the midwives in the house whispered among themselves, none of them dared step out to share the news. In their hearts still lived the age-old fear of the Arabs of that time, the fear of bringing what they believed was bad news about a baby girl. A woman, trembling, walked forward, lowered her head, and said softly, "It is a girl." But instead of silence, instead of the darkened face of so many other men, Muhammad smiled with radiant joy. He held out his arms, received the tiny child, pressed her to his chest, and lifted his gaze to the sky. "Alhamdulillah," he said, "all praise belongs to Allah." In that home, for the first time, a man felt no shame for having a daughter. He was proud to be given a gift by Allah. Society then was decaying in ignorance. They drank wine to forget purpose, gambled to chase pleasure, and buried innocent children beneath hot sand simply because they were born female. Yet in that storm, there was a man who did not bow to custom and did not bend to the age. Zaynab was the proof of that difference, a daughter born not to be forgotten, but to begin a legacy of compassion and faith. The Prophet Muhammad looked into those clear newborn eyes and saw another future, a future in which women would no longer be shadows, but light. From childhood, Zaynab grew up in an atmosphere soaked with virtue and wisdom. Her father, Muhammad, had not yet been given the mission then, but his soul was pure and unlike the world around him. He never touched wine, never told a lie, never bowed to idols, and never looked down on a person because of gender. Under that roof, little Zaynab was nurtured in the warmth of love, the kind of love that melts every prejudice. That day, as dusk draped the hills around Mecca, Muhammad stepped to the doorway with his daughter in his arms. The late sun fell over father and child like a thin silk shawl. He smiled as he looked at the men losing themselves in cheers at the market of Ukaz and murmured to himself, "This is true happiness." No one heard those words, but history did. It recorded the moment a father loved his daughter in a world that did not know how to love. Zaynab grew with her mother Khadijah's gentleness and her father's resolve. She learned not only to help her mother and care for her siblings, but also to listen to her father's reflections on matters beyond the understanding of people of that time, on ethics, on compassion, on the truth that lives inside the soul. Perhaps on those evenings sitting beside her father, hearing him speak about the goodness toward which people should reach, the seed of faith was planted in her heart. Whenever Muhammad returned home after long days of contemplation on Mount Hijrah, Zaynab would often run out to greet him. Though she was young, she sensed something deep in her father's eyes, as if he were searching for something greater than this life. And it was that unconditional love between father and daughter that formed the sacred thread woven through Zaynab's life, a thread that allowed her to endure every loss and every sacrifice for the sake of protecting the faith her father would bring to the world. People say a father's love is a quiet love, yet deeper than the ocean. It is true, because before the faith of humanity was illuminated, inside that small home there already existed a love too pure for words. The prophet looked at his daughter and saw in her the outline of a faith not yet spoken. And perhaps, as he held Zaynab to his chest, he felt that this child would face storms the world had never seen, yet her heart would never yield. The story of Zaynab did not begin with a heartbeat alone, but with the birth of conviction. A child was born into the night of an age, yet the light in her eyes calmed the whole sky over Mecca. It is a story about love, about human dignity, and about the dawn of faith within the human heart. Welcome to Echoes of Eternity, where forgotten stories are told again in the light of memory and reverence. If you believe that every life has a reason to exist, walk with us. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel, so we have more strength to bring you the next inspiring and meaningful stories. Time passed. The light of Mecca softened over the sandy hills, and young Zaynab, the firstborn daughter of Muhammad and Khadijah, may Allah be pleased with her, became a poised and resolute young woman. Her mother's gentleness blended with her father's insight and steadfastness, making her the kind of daughter everyone who met her could not help but respect. In every step and every word, she carried calm and humility, yet her eyes held a depth that could not be easily grasped, the eyes of one raised in love and the light of faith. Her cousin, Abu al-As ibn al-Rabi, was a young merchant known throughout Mecca for skill and honesty. He often visited the home of Khadijah, may Allah be pleased with her, not only because of family ties, but because of his affection for that household, a family set apart in a proud society. With each visit, his gaze lingered on Zaynab a little longer, and at some point, he began to carry her image in his heart. The young woman with a gentle smile and deft hands weaving at the loom, evening light glinting in her hair. He did not dare to confess his feelings. He simply followed her steps from a distance, like someone seeking something more sacred than love itself. Khadijah, may Allah be pleased with her, a mother both perceptive and kind, soon recognized this. She saw the sincerity in her nephew's eyes and understood that this love was free of appetite or calculation. It arose from true admiration. One day, Abu al-As asked for Zaynab's hand in marriage. Khadijah, may Allah be pleased with her, brought his words to the Prophet Muhammad. The gentle father listened, smiled, and said, "My daughter has the right to choose. Ask her." Zaynab did not answer right away. She lowered her head in silence, her face blushing. In Arab culture, that silence was consent. The Prophet smiled with contentment. The wedding was prepared, not lavish, not showy, only simple and sincerely joyful. On the wedding day, the Prophet personally escorted his daughter to her new home. He held her hand and softly said, "Live with compassion and hold fast to faith in Allah, because true happiness endures only when it is built upon that." Then he turned to Abu al-As and advised, "Treat my daughter with respect and love, because she is a part of my heart." Their marriage began sweetly. Mecca had not yet known Islam, but inside the small home of the young couple, there was a rare peace amid the turmoil of society. Abu al-As was an exemplary husband, diligent, honest, and devoted. On each trading journey to the lands of Sham or Yemen, he brought back small gifts for Khadijah. May Allah be pleased with her, and especially for Zaynab. A piece of cloth, a bracelet, sometimes only a few shining stones he had picked up along the road, but all wrapped in deep affection. For Zaynab, no gift was more precious than his questions when he returned, the gentle smile on a sun-worn face, and hands made rough by honorable work. Life flowed quietly until a fateful night, the night Muhammad returned from the cave of Hijrah, his face lit by a mingled fear and exhilaration that words could not hold. He said to Khadijah, "May Allah be pleased with her, I met the angel." From that moment on, Zaynab's world changed forever. She saw her father become more reserved, his gaze deeper, his voice newly resolute. One day she asked her mother, "Mother, what has happened to father?" Khadijah took her hand and answered with a trembling voice, "Your father has been chosen by Allah to be his messenger. Jibril has come to him." Zaynab's heart trembled. She was silent for a while, then whispered, "If you believe, then I believe." With that simple sentence, she became one of the first women to accept Islam. From then on, she stood quietly in the background, not appearing in public, yet watching every step of her father, the one standing alone against Mecca to bring Allah's words to humanity. When Abu al-As returned from a trading journey, he heard news of a new religion, a self-proclaimed prophet, none other than Muhammad. He hurried home and asked Zaynab, "Is it true? Is it true that your father says there is only one God?" Zaynab looked straight into her husband's eyes, her voice firm yet gentle. "Yes, it is true. I have believed, and I know my father has never told a lie." He fell silent, looking at his young wife with love and pain mixed together. He spoke softly, "I cannot betray the tradition of my ancestors. I do not want people to say that I followed your father's faith only because of you." His answer cracked Zaynab's heart, but she did not blame him. She understood that faith cannot be forced. She lowered her head and said quietly, "I will pray for you. I will ask Allah to bring light to your heart, just as He brought light to mine." From that day on, an invisible trial began between them, a struggle between love and faith. Although she knew her husband had not yet accepted Islam, Zaynab remained a gentle, loyal, and deeply respectful wife. She did not argue, she did not judge, she simply served him quietly, and when night fell, she knelt and prayed for him. In that small room, under the flicker of a small oil lamp, a young woman wept in silence, not out of despair, but out of hope. She believed that one day the heart she loved most would find its way back to Allah. Their love, like an oil lamp in desert winds, was small but unyielding. And it was that quiet conviction that turned Zaynab's story into one of the most poignant songs in history, where a woman is not only a wife, but a symbol of steadfastness, a soul that loves with all its being, believes without hesitation, and is ready to sacrifice everything to preserve her faith. The dark days began when the harsh winds of tyranny rose in Mecca. The powerful among Quraysh not only rejected the message of Islam, but saw it as a threat to the old social order. They forbade, brutalized, and tore apart families once at peace. In that storm, Zaynab remained in Mecca, a place that had been home and had become a cold land for people of faith. Her father, the Prophet Muhammad, had migrated with the believers to Medina, carrying the light of Islam to a new land, but Zaynab was left behind, not because her faith was weak, but because her husband Abu al-As was not yet ready to leave the religion of his ancestors. She stayed in Mecca, alone among scornful eyes and cruel whispers that the daughter of the one who claims to be a prophet still lived among her father's enemies. Even so, Zaynab kept a small flame alive inside. She continued to pray and quietly memorized verses sent from Medina by believers who slipped back in secret. At night, when Abu al-As slept, she sat alone under the oil lamp and softly recited the verses of the Quran she had learned by heart. Every prayer, every sob reached toward one plea: "O Allah, guide the man I love." Time passed, and the day of destiny arrived, the day Quraysh chose to end Islam with swords and spears. Their mighty army marched to Badr to face the believers in Medina. Among their ranks was Abu al-As, the man Zaynab loved with her very life. When she heard the news, she did not weep. She stood still, hands gripping her old wedding scarf, and whispered, "O Allah, I do not know who is right and who is wrong, but please protect the one I love." The battle broke out, and history decreed that though they were fewer, the Muslims prevailed. When the list of prisoners reached Medina, the name of Abu al-As was on it. When Zaynab heard, her heart clenched as if in a fist. She wanted to rush to Medina, but she could not. She gathered all the money she had, and in the quietest moment of the night, she opened her mother's old chest, Khadijah's chest. May Allah be pleased with her. Inside lay the necklace her mother had worn on her wedding day, a keepsake that held not only memory, but the spirit of the woman who had passed on. Zaynab took that necklace, kissed it, tears falling over each bead, and sent it with a caravan to Medina to redeem her husband's freedom. When the necklace was placed in the hands of the prophet, he paused. In the bright eyes of the messenger, there was a light mixed with deep sorrow. He recognized it instantly, the keepsake of Khadijah, his first wife, the one who believed in him when the world turned away. His hands trembled and tears fell in silence. In that moment, everyone present grew quiet. The prophet looked at the companions and said, "If you wish, return this ransom to Zaynab, for it is her mother's memory." The companions agreed at once, and Abu al-As was set free with one condition. When he returned to Mecca, he would send Zaynab to Medina. Abu al-As kept that promise. But that journey from Mecca to Medina became one of history's deepest wounds. Zaynab and her young daughter left Mecca in daylight, thinking Quraysh would not dare attack the daughter of Muhammad. They were mistaken. When the news spread, a band of horsemen gave chase, led by Hubah ibn al-Aswad, a man filled with hatred for Islam. He thrust his spear into Zaynab's camel. The animal reared and crashed down. She fell, her abdomen striking the ground, and blood poured out. The child in her womb, whom she had not yet named, died there on the desert sand. Her escort, Kinana ibn al-Rabi, drew his bow and shouted, "Whoever takes one more step, I will shoot." But they were many, and he knew he could not win. Then Abu Sufyan arrived and ordered them to stop, not out of mercy, but out of fear for Quraysh's reputation. He said, "Take her back to Mecca. When tempers cool, let her go." Zaynab, still bleeding, managed to rise and look toward the distance, toward Medina waiting for her. She did not condemn them. She did not wail. She only said softly, "Allah is my protector." Zaynab was taken back to Mecca and cared for by a woman named Attica. The outer wound slowly healed, but inside her, the wound never closed. Months later, in the darkness of night, Kenana kept his word and secretly led her out of Mecca. Under the moonlight, she and her young daughter, with a few loyal believers, moved silently across the desert. They walked for hours without rest, far from the main roads. Near Medina, she lifted her eyes to the sky, tears shimmering. Every star seemed to whisper comfort. Your journey has reached its end. When she arrived, the prophet went out himself to welcome his daughter. He held her tightly. And for a moment, the years of separation, the blood and the losses seemed to dissolve. Yet in his eyes there remained a pain that had no name. He knew Zaynab's journey had only begun, and the trials for that steadfast heart were not over. For within her destiny, Allah had arranged that love, faith, and endurance would stand as testimony to the power of belief, the kind of light that neither blood nor tears could extinguish. From the day Zaynab stepped into Medina, her life opened to a new chapter, yet a chapter still shadowed by the past. She could be near her father, see the believers living in peace after years of persecution, yet a space within her could not be filled. Though she had escaped Mecca, her heart turned toward the husband far away, the man she loved who did not share her faith. Each morning, as sunlight brushed the golden sands of Medina, Zaynab looked toward the west, where her husband still lived in the darkness of doubt. She prayed every night, sometimes without words, only with tears, soaking her prayer rug. In Medina, the life of Muslims began to settle. They built homes, raised the masjid, and formed a new society based on justice and brotherhood. But conflict had not let go. One day, harsh news arrived. A caravan of Quraysh merchants returning from the lands of Sham with great wealth was taken near Medina by Muslims. Among them, the commander was none other than Abu al-As. When the Muslims seized the goods, Abu al-As was captured with others. He realized fate had brought him to his wife's doorstep in a way no one expected. That night, while the guards were distracted, he escaped. He did not run back to Mecca. He ran to the one place he knew would shelter him, Zaynab's home. Just before dawn, a soft knock sounded at the door. Zaynab opened it and saw the man she had been separated from for years. Their eyes met in silence, breath unsteady. He said softly, "I have come to seek your protection." Without a second thought, Zaynab answered, "You are safe. In Islam, the protection granted by a Muslim is sacred." She brought him inside, gave him food and a place to rest, but she did not touch him. Inside her was a storm of feeling, joy, pain, worry, everything flowing together like a rushing river. That morning, as the Prophet led the dawn prayer in the masjid, Zaynab's voice rose from behind. "O my father, I announce that I have granted protection to Abu al-As." The masjid fell utterly silent. The Prophet paused, then said, "O people, you have heard what Zaynab has said. The protection my daughter has extended, we honor and accept." No one objected. He looked toward the back, his gaze gentle but firm, and added, "O my daughter, treat him well, but keep your distance, for he is not yet one of us." Zaynab returned home with a heavy heart. She found Abu al-As waiting, eyes full of gratitude and shame. "Thank you," he said, "for even though I did not walk with you on the path of faith, you have saved me once more." Zaynab did not answer. She offered a small smile and said quietly, "I only did what Allah teaches. That mercy is the road that leads to light." During the days Abu al-As remained in Medina, she cooked for him and prepared a place for him to sleep, but she never crossed the boundary. Each night, when he saw her in prayer, the light of faith shining from Zaynab's face pulled at his heart toward another world, a world he had once feared yet now longed for. After consulting with the companions, the Prophet decided to return all the property of Abu al-As and the Quraysh merchants who had been captured, keeping nothing. When he heard this, Abu al-As was struck silent. He understood that no worldly system teaches people to win through mercy the way this faith does. He was permitted to return to Mecca, and before he left, Zaynab walked him to the edge of the road, love bright in her eyes, yet held back. He clasped her hand one last time and whispered, "If Allah grants me the chance, I will return, not as a prisoner, but as one who shares your faith." Back in Mecca, Abu al-As did what no one expected. He gathered the people, returned each item and every coin that had been lost. When all testified that he owed no one anything, he stood among them and said in a steady, deep voice, "O people, I declare that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger." Mecca fell silent. They could not believe that this proud man would bow to the faith of his wife. But it was not surrender. It was awakening. He did not wait. Abu al-As left Mecca that very night, crossed the desert with a heart at ease, and headed for Medina. When he arrived, he went straight to the masjid and pronounced the testimony of faith before the Prophet. The Prophet looked at him, eyes bright with joy, and smiled, "Abu al-As, you have returned not only to Islam, but to the love that Allah protected all these years." Then he returned Zaynab to her husband and said, "Allah has rejoined the bond that people once cut." In that moment of reunion, Zaynab broke into tears. The years of separation, the blood, and the sorrow finally resolved in faith. Abu al-As held her, and no words were needed, for they both knew this love no longer belonged to two people alone. It was a love witnessed by Allah. In their small home in Medina, their laughter rose gently, as if grief itself had drifted away on the wind. Yet behind that joy lay something fragile that even Zaynab could feel, that this reunion was the final gift life would grant her before Allah called her home. Their happiness in Medina lasted like a short dream. After 16 years of separation and trial, they were finally together, but time did not allow them to enjoy long peace. The injuries from the day she fell from the camel on the road of migration, along with the years of lonely endurance, had quietly worn down Zaynab's health. Her body weakened, her skin grew pale, and her breath grew short. But her face still held the gentleness and the light of faith, a light nothing could put out. That day, Medina seemed wrapped in stillness. Abu al-As sat by her bed, holding her hand. In his tired eyes lived both fear and helplessness. He had been strong, had crossed deserts, had faced battles. But now, before the woman slipping away from this world, he was only a man undone, unable to hold on to the most precious part of his life. Zaynab smiled faintly, her cracked lips trembling. "Do not cry. We have found each other again, and Allah has given us more than we asked for." He gripped her hand more tightly, swallowing a sob. "I made you suffer too much," he said. "I wish I could die in your place." Zaynab lightly shook her head, her eyes looking far beyond. "No, you have walked the path Allah wrote for you, and you have returned. My greatest happiness is seeing you believe in Him." News of Zaynab's illness reached the prophet. He hurried to his daughter's home. When he entered, he saw her lying there, thin and weak, yet still smiling. He took the small hand that had once held his when she was a child and had wiped away tears when her father was insulted at the Kaaba. That hand was cold now, but it tried to hold his tightly. The prophet sat beside his daughter, his tears falling into her hair. "My daughter," he said, "I am here." Zaynab opened her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Father, for teaching me that there is no love more enduring than love for Allah." A few days later, Zaynab's soul left her earthly body. She departed in silence, like a candle going out in the night. The whole of Medina sank into sorrow. The prophet stood for a long time, tears unceasing. He had been the messenger who faced the whole world with strength, but before the loss of his daughter, his heart trembled. He ordered that her body be washed for burial. When the Muslim women arrived, he guided them with care for every detail. Begin from the right side and with the places used for ablution. Wash her 3 times, 5 times, or more if you see the need. And when you finish, use camphor or a touch of fragrance. When they were done, the prophet sent his own garment and said, "Use this as the innermost shroud for my daughter." It was not only a piece of cloth, but a father's heart wanting to hold his child one last time, to keep her warm in the earth. He went to the grave himself, looked down into the newly opened ground, his eyes wet. Then he stepped into it, smoothed the soil with his hands, and gazed for a long while before lifting his face to the sky and praying, "O Allah, expand my daughter's grave, make it light and peaceful, for you know that she was fragile." When he stepped out, his face suddenly eased, as if he had just seen a sign of serenity. The companions asked, "O Messenger of Allah, why has your expression changed?" The prophet replied, "I asked Allah to widen my daughter's grave, and He has answered." Abu al-As stood nearby, unable to speak. He watched the earth cover her grave, his eyes empty, as if the world had slipped away. After the burial, he went to the prophet and said softly, "I will not marry again. My heart belongs to one person." The prophet did not answer with words. He placed his hand on the man's shoulder. In that grip was a shared understanding, the deepest sympathy between two men who had loved the same woman, one as a father, one as a husband. Years later, when people spoke of Zaynab, they did not only remember her as the prophet's daughter, they remembered a woman who lived a life of faith, steadfastness, and rare grace. She loved with a whole heart, believed with a soul free of doubt, and endured with strength beyond human measure. Her love for her husband did not make her weak. It made her faith stronger, brighter, enough to rescue a wandering soul. Zaynab's story is not only a tragedy, it is a lesson in love lit by faith, where we learn to love without possession, to sacrifice without resentment, and to wait without despair. In her brief life, she showed that tranquility does not come from avoiding pain, but from accepting it as part of the journey back to Allah. If you ever feel lost, hurt, or find the world unbearably cruel, remember Zaynab, the woman who turned tears into prayer, who turned separation into a path toward salvation. She is gone, but her legacy lives on in the hearts of those who know that true love is a heart that turns toward the one who created it. And perhaps, somewhere in the gardens of paradise, Zaynab still smiles in the embrace of the one she trusted all her life. In today's world, as people lose understanding, patience, and true love, Zaynab's story remains as timely as ever. It reminds us that faith is not an escape from suffering, but the courage to face it, believing that every trial carries Allah's design. Love is not possession. It is a shared journey toward what is good, right, and higher. If life brings you loss, betrayal, or separation, remember Zaynab, the one who turned every pain into a chance to move closer to Allah. Let faith become your strength, and let gratitude turn every wound into light. If you wish to keep listening to stories carrying the light of faith, lessons of patience, love, and spiritual awakening, then join the Echoes of Eternity community, where we explore eternal values written with tears, hope, and belief. Please subscribe to our channel to support us in bringing thoughtful, inspiring content that helps your heart find peace in a restless world.